Why are the people of Budapest revolting? Whom are the workers of Berlin, Prague, and Warsaw rebelling against? Aren't they in power, in a glorious society where brother no longer turns against brother? So why the tanks? The barbed wire and this wall. The Budapest insurrection is the first anti-totalitarian revolution in the history of workers' uprisings. Mortal? Was he mortal? The man lying on this bed of flowers was equal to the gods. March 6, 1953. The world learns that an ordinary cerebral hemorrhage has taken the idol of communism, Joseph Stalin. All the statues erected to his glory proclaim him the greatest man of all time. The common people's grief is genuine. They've lost a father. What will become of them now? The whole world pays its final respects. Everywhere, communists swear fealty to Stalinism. In Moscow, the Kremlin is the scene of mass hysteria. Hundreds die in an attempt to see the master one last time. Reality doesn't matter. Only the Kremlin's official truth counts. Truth is the love and goodness emanating from Stalin's face. Approaching him is a joy that lasts a lifetime. Stalin is the friend of all children. Stalin is the architect of a marvelous universe. Thanks to him, the people of the Soviet Union live better, happier, and freer than anyone else. Stalin's genius floods the world. He's a man of peace, a brilliant strategist, the sole victor of the great patriotic war. Stalin, the hero, fought the Nazis. The Germano-Soviet Pact of 1939 is long forgotten. Hitler's collusion with Hitler to share the remains of Poland is removed from Soviet history books. Yalta, 1945. The triumph of cynicism and duplicity. Stalin creates an empire based on unkept promises, rigged elections, and the assassination of opponents. The new Tsar Sovietizes half of Europe. Soldiers back from the war discover gulags, mass deportations, conviction without trials, torture, and executions. The Iron Curtain falls on the besieged citadel. In 1949 in Hungary, the minister Reich is convicted, then executed. No one is safe, especially Stalin's associates. He's becoming increasingly concerned with plots against his life. These men live in terror. In 1952, the sinister Prague trials are held. Fake confessions prove that the majority of the Czechoslovakian Communist Party leaders belong to a Zionist and a Titoist plot. They are liquidated. The doctors' plot occurs a year later. Jewish doctors are accused of trying to destroy the revolution and attempting to kill its leader. The tyrant's death prevents their execution and the projected purge. The heirs, Molotov, Beria, and Malenkov, first have to forget their fear and prevent the emergence of a new Stalin. All three are aware. All three have blood on their hands. But Beria is the most dangerous, therefore the perfect scapegoat. He is arrested and shot. Practically unknown in the West, one man will establish his power little by little, Nikita Khrushchev. Who would have thought that this little man could shake up all Stalinist society? The first people's revolt in a socialist country breaks out shortly after Stalin's death in Berlin. Sovietization has led East Germany to great discontent. June 17, 1953, hundreds of thousands of Berliners crowd the streets, demanding bread and free elections. The first Soviet tanks appear. The confrontations are violent. There are dozens of deaths. A state of siege is proclaimed. Repression is severe. The exodus of citizens toward the west increases. This is a warning that decides the Kremlin to modify its general policy. Khrushchev starts to talk about peaceful coexistence brilliantly. He becomes reconciled with Tito, the heretic, and Stalin's sworn enemy. Hope for a little more freedom reemerges in the East Bloc countries. The thaw is confirmed at the Conference of Smiles in Geneva. Stalin is gone, and Hungary is living its first spring. The Stalinist Rákóczi is forced to accept Imre Nagy at the head of the government. Nagy is Hungarian first, communist second. He announces a liberal program, camp closures, and the re-establishment of justice and the return of land to the peasants. Hungary begins to dream of her lost freedom, the old-time Hungary, where the small landowners' party won a 57% majority in the 1945 elections. Intensely religious, Hungary dares to hope that she will once again become herself, passionately turn to the West. This nostalgia for a recent past worries the Kremlin. Russians and Hungarians are traditional enemies. Moscow hasn't forgotten that Hungary has always been on the wrong side, the German side, in both 1914 and 1940. In March 1955, Rákóczi is avenged. Imre Nagy is dismissed from office. He becomes a legend, the people's hope, and he is constantly on their minds. The 20th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union is held in Moscow in February 1956, the first one since Stalin's death. For the past 3 years, his successors have grown away from their idol, but the delegates gathered in the dead of night behind closed doors have no idea of what is awaiting them. In a 4-hour speech, Nikita Khrushchev denounces the Stalin personality cult, his faults, and his crimes. Khrushchev's secret report is soon known worldwide. The shock is staggering. The Poles are the first to demand an explanation. In fact, de-Stalinization began in Warsaw well before the 20th Congress. Polish intellectuals openly challenged the system. In June, violent workers' riots break out in Poznan. By October, unrest is general throughout the country. The Polish people demand the return of the anti-Stalinist Władysław Gomułka. The Soviet Marshal Rokossovsky, Polish Minister of Defense, orders the Russian troops to move. To avoid trouble, the party names Gomułka first secretary. Outraged, Khrushchev rushes to Warsaw. After a dramatic confrontations, the Russians give in and accept Gomułka. A jubilant Poland can hardly believe its victory. Gomułka is a disappointment. But in October 1956, hundreds of thousands of Poles gather and hope for better days. Poland recovers Cardinal Wyszynski, her Catholic primate, imprisoned 3 years earlier. The Polish events stir Hungary. For several weeks, the statue of the poet Petőfi, the Hungarian hero of independence, has been the scene of gatherings of students and intellectuals who demand Imre Nagy's reinstatement. Rákóczi has already been forced to rehabilitate the victims of the purges. October 6, a huge crowd attends the state funeral of former Minister Reich. Imre Nagy is present. October 23, the day after the Polish victory, Budapest is euphoric. Why not us, the Hungarians ask themselves as they invade the streets by the thousands. A list of demands is handed out, which can be resumed in one word: freedom. Excitement spreads throughout the crowds. The red stars are torn from government buildings, the emblems of the Hungarian nation. Provocation or stupidity? That evening, the head of the Hungarian Communist Party calls the crowd riffraff. The demonstration becomes a riot, and then someone fired the first shots. Budapest revolts against a hated regime and pays for its folly with its blood. Late that night, the symbol of oppression collapses. At dawn, the crowd gathers to insult it and spit on it. Meanwhile, the first Soviet tanks cross the Danube and enter Budapest. Barricades are erected. A fierce 5-day battle ensues. Panicked, the Kremlin dismisses the Stalinists. Janos Kadar is appointed head of the party that night. He denies having called in the Russians and demands that they withdraw, as does Imre Nagy, who is also called back to power, but at the worst possible moment. October 25, the crowd gathers before the parliament, peacefully. Suddenly, members of the secret police hiding in the building open fire. It's a massacre. Hundreds are killed. The incident provokes civil war. Collaborators and watchdogs of the hated regime are hunted down. The secretary of the Communist Party in Budapest and his staff are arrested and shot. Pal Malater, a colonel in the Hungarian army, joins the uprising. The news spreads. Soldiers from the barracks do little or nothing to prevent the rebels from seizing arms and ammunition. Budapest sets the example for the rest of the country. Revolutionary councils are formed and seize power. The West sends provisions and medicine, whereas the Hungarians were asking for arms and hoping for an intervention. October 29, the Soviet troops agree to leave Budapest. Hungarian tanks driven by insurgents control the city. The revolution is victorious. The people have forced the giant to back down. At this point, the country believes in her recovered freedom. Budapest begins to erase the traces of fighting. Cardinal Mindszenty, arrested in 1949, is set free. Prison has not shaken his resolve, and he still considers himself the embodiment of spiritual Hungary. And so life returns to normal. Hungary remains a socialist country, but Imre Nagy forms a government with only 3 communists. Old parties are reborn, and the people demand free elections, a return to neutrality, and a condemnation of the Warsaw Pact. Obviously, Hungary considers she has already left the Soviet bloc. Unfortunately, the West will help Moscow settle the Hungarian problem. July 26, Colonel Nasser announces the Suez Canal's return to Egypt. England and France are against this nationalization. Eden and Guy Mollet agree on a military intervention in liaison with the Israelis. The operation begins on October 29 in the midst of the Hungarian uprising. Nasser's army is routed in several days. From Moscow, the Kremlin threatens to intervene. In Washington, President Eisenhower condemns the expedition.
It's really waging peace based upon moral principles of decency and justice and right.
The French and the British yield and retreat. The Suez operation leaves the West weakened and divided. Hungary is forgotten. The Kremlin won't pass up this chance. In reality, the Soviet troops have never left Hungary. At dawn, November 4, hundreds of tanks enter Budapest. At 5:20 a.m., Imre Nagy addresses the nation.
Itt Nagy Imre beszél, a Magyar Népköztársaság minisztertanácsának elnöke.
Ici Imre Nagy, président du Conseil. Aujourd'hui à l'aube, les troupes soviétiques ont déclenché une attaque contre Budapest avec l'intention évidente de renverser le gouvernement légal de la démocratie hongroise. Nos troupes combattent. Le gouvernement est à son poste. J'en avertis le peuple hongrois et l'opinion publique du monde entier.
This last dispatch from Free Hungary reaches Western journalists. The Russians are too close. We are leaving our posts. Farewell, friends. Save our souls. All organized resistance is quashed in hours. But in some quarters, insurgents resist several days with rifles against tanks. Shells are fired at random on the population to force the fighters to surrender. "48 hours before the intervention, Nagy proclaimed Hungary's independence and neutrality. The dream is shattered by 2,500 tanks and 75,000 men. There were 2,000 casualties in Budapest, mostly workers. It's all over. Imre Nagy gains sanctuary at the Yugoslavian embassy. János Kadar joins the Russians at the last minute and forms a new government. Those who fought are threatened with arrest and deportation. The idea of living under the Soviet heel is unbearable for thousands of others. So, they must leave the country. And the Russians aren't in a hurry to close the borders, probably intentionally. Most of the border guards help their countrymen flee. Cardinal Mindszenty takes refuge in the United States Embassy. The last strikes are broken and worker councils are disbanded. Budapest has no choice but to fall back into line. The exodus is impressive. With hardly any possessions, over 200,000 Hungarians leave their native soil for Austria, the first land of welcome. With new papers, they go on to France, Italy, England, Argentina, and America. A new life is waiting for them in what they consider the free world. Maurice Thorez, head of the French Communist Party, declares that Hungary has narrowly escaped a counter-revolution. Thousands of demonstrators ransack the headquarters of the French Communist Party, and all over Europe the Hungarian tragedy provokes cracks within the international communist movement. Dozens of intellectuals quietly leave the party, finally aware of the Soviets' true intentions. Copenhagen and Stockholm condemn the act in silence. It takes courage for those who remain in Hungary. As Budapest is rebuilt, those who refuse to submit are faced with repression, imprisonment, or death. A year later, Khrushchev signs a treaty with the new Hungarian leader. An anti-Stalinist, but a true communist, János Kadar will cautiously build an acceptable Soviet model with the exclusion of freedom. June 17, 1958. A horrified world learns the execution of Imre Nagy and his friends. Nagy is kidnapped in front of the Yugoslavian embassy and accused of high treason. He is executed along with Pal Militaire, despite contrary promises from the Hungarian government. In 1957, a 60-centimeter diameter sphere will quickly make the world forget unfortunate Hungary. The Sputnik, the Earth's first artificial satellite, is launched by the Soviets. In 1961, they send the first man into space, Yuri Gagarin. The United States is worried and humiliated. From now on, Mr. K, as he is called in the West, will speak loud and clear. The USSR has missiles capable of attacking the United States. A new era begins, an age where superpowers realize they can annihilate each other and the rest of the world in the process. Colorful and apparently easygoing, Nikita Khrushchev travels abroad and tries to give a reassuring image of the USSR. In 1961, Mr. K tests young President Kennedy, and the Vienna Conference is a failure. Three months later, the Kremlin raises the stakes in Berlin. Faced with the East Germans' mass exodus, Moscow decides to cut the city in two, with the Berlin Wall. The next year, détente suffers another hitch. Nikita Khrushchev takes a gamble in Cuba. October 14, 1962, an American U-2 returns with proof of Russian missile installations in progress on Fidel Castro's island. Kennedy immediately counterattacks with a congressionally approved naval blockade.
Maintain the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba.
For a week, the world totters on the edge of war. But this time, Moscow has overplayed its hand. Mr. K pulls out his missiles. The Kremlin's relations with China are strained too. The break with Peking, which has just tested China's first atomic bomb, condemns the turbulent Mr. K. In October 1964, Nikita Khrushchev is sent into retirement. The new leader is Leonid Brezhnev, whose style is also good-natured and apparently warm. Détente is maintained. Peaceful coexistence is organized to the Red Army's advantage. It manages to catch up with and even surpass the United States, humiliated by the situation in Vietnam. Ten years later, the situation has come full turn, and with America's unease, the whole West finds itself on the defensive and begins to doubt its values. In May 1968, Mao and Che Guevara have replaced Stalin. but French society is starting to dream about something else. Comfort and democracy no longer seduce the young who have never known anything else and who are bored. That same spring, the people of Prague who lack what is both essential and superfluous began to hope. Alexander Dubček is their hope. His face is a reflection of the type of man he is, honest, good, and generous, but also indecisive. At 45, he manages to oust Novotny, who has blocked all liberalization for the past 10 years. With Smikovsky and Svoboda, the new president, he wants to reform the party from within and reconcile communism and freedom. The three men personify the nation's hopes to repulse both Stalinism and the Stalinists. Censorship is abolished, and people continually talk about socialism with a human face. But this doesn't agree with Moscow. Warsaw Pact tanks hover near the border. They're only on maneuvers for the time being, but invasion is on everyone's mind. In July, a meeting is planned with the Soviets to resolve the problems. It takes place at the border in Cherna. In a few hours, 500,000 people come to sign a citizen's appeal for Dubček to stand firm. Returning from Cherna, Dubček and Svoboda know that nothing is settled, despite their smiles. A new summit is planned for August 3 in Bratislava. The entire Politburo accompanies Leonid Brezhnev. They are warmly welcomed, as though the population wants to convince the Soviet leaders of Czechoslovakia's good intentions. Officially, the summit is a complete success. There was never any question of a military intervention, and Leonid Brezhnev has demonstrated communist bloc solidarity. Dubček really seems convinced he has avoided the worst. And the meeting ends in a touching show of unanimity. At that moment, the takeover is probably already decided. The invasion of Czechoslovakia takes place during the night of August 21. At daybreak, the tanks enter Prague. Dubček asks the army and the population not to resist. The Warsaw Pact soldiers thought they were going into a country in revolt. Instead, they were asked questions and occasionally insulted by an empty-handed people enraged by their own helplessness. What can they say? How can they answer a crowd that is just asking, why have you come here? The situation turns into an embarrassment for the Kremlin. No one in Prague supports the operation. Even the Stalinists remain aloof because of the people's reaction. The soldiers came to save the revolution, but they end up keeping the peace. Czechoslovakia learned a lesson from Hungary. The Kremlin now seems to be the troublemaker, occupying a country without a valid reason. There are some shooting incidents and victims, but there is no real confrontation. The Kremlin reacts with discretion. Dubček and his collaborators are practically kidnapped and taken to Moscow. The headquarters of the Czechoslovakian Communist Party is cut off by the Soviet army. As a solution, Svoboda agrees to go to Moscow to negotiate. He receives an official welcome. But at the Kremlin, the tone changes. Svoboda demands Dubček's presence. Brezhnev and Kosygin threateningly lay down conditions. They demand a return to the orthodox communist system in all areas. After 4 days of browbeating, Dubček and Svoboda accept the diktat. Hearing the news, Czechoslovakia is crushed. But was there ever any choice? Returning from Moscow, still head of the government, Dubček's first thought is to avoid an outbreak of violence.
Sa prejaví nejaká prestávka i v tejto mojej mnohom improvizovanej reči a improvizovanom vystúpení. Myslím,
almost tearfully, in an improvised speech, he pleads with his countrymen to overcome despair, to remain calm and united.
Nedovolte vniesť paniku do našich radov. nezostáva nám v ťažkej situácii nič iné, ako napnúť všetky sily, všetok rozum, aby sme v ďalšej práci skutočne obstáli. Nezahynie národ, v ktorom sa každý dokáže riadiť tak svojim rozumom, ako svojim svedomím.
Dubček and Svoboda have often been criticized for accepting Moscow's extortive agreement. Perhaps they were wrong. But they ended up proving that even reform is unacceptable to Moscow. The system is untouchable. It's either the system or it's something else. And if you remove a few stones from a wall, it's bound to collapse.
V našej vernosti socializmu, v našej čestnosti, v našom úsilí a charaktere je záruka cesty vpred.
A few months after the invasion, a young student decides to die rather than to live in the shadow of the tanks. January 16, 1969, Jan Palash immolates himself. A huge crowd attends his funeral, revealing their refusal of normalization without a single shout or a slogan. In April, Dubček and all the liberals are removed from office, but their lives are spared. Since Stalin's death, deposed leaders are no longer liquidated, but simply condemned to oblivion. After a long period of total darkness, a glimmer of freedom is seen in Poland, where workers' revolts have never really stopped. In 1980, solidarity is born. 10 million workers unite behind a young electrical worker who decides to carry on the fight differently. Solidarity has suffered, but still goes on. As long as we resist, says Lech Walesa, we continue to exist. Once again, the Soviets called in the military and the tanks to save the system. This time, Moscow used another tactic, but the result is always the same. Stalin can lie easy. His empire is intact.